Hey friends, here are a few things to keep in mind this week and a couple of practices that I'd like for you to lean into and think about this week in conversation with your child. And as we come to a close on this section of God's love, I really want you to explore this week your own experience of God's love. We've just spent 6 weeks thinking about the love of God and hopefully experiencing the love of God. And for me, one of the questions that comes up as I offer spiritual direction to people is this question: what do you do when you feel separated from God? When you feel distant from God, or perhaps God feels a little distant from you? So when you find that your experience of God is not what you really want it to be, it's important to notice what might be going on around you and in you that could be causing the spiritual distance. So sometimes that feeling of distance is a result of our own inattentiveness to prayer or our lack of awareness of God's work in our life. But listen, other times it has nothing to do with us. It's not like we're doing anything wrong that's causing us to feel distant. And this is really important to begin to think through. St. Ignatius reminds us that sometimes God's distance from us is a form of grace that reminds us of how truly good it is when we are experiencing the nearness of God. So sometimes we experience God as distant and far away, not because there's anything wrong, but because He's maturing us. He's growing us up by nurturing a dependence upon Him and reminding us that we are forever in need of God's grace. So I wonder if that perspective is helpful to you as you think about those periods of your life that feel like they're distant from God. There's this feature in our life with God where we are at the same time believing that nothing can separate us from the love of God. And yet our experience often includes times where that love and the presence of God feels really inaccessible to us. And listen, this is really hard. I live through seasons like this all of the time. And some of this is also attributed theologically to this idea that God is a hidden God, which we read about in Isaiah. That part of God's nature is a certain hiddenness and unknowability, the theologians tell us, such that our experience of that sort of facet of God is part of what keeps us searching after Him, that we desire to know God and to be known by God, and yet reaching that destination is really a journey from where we are now to where we will be one day in the consummation of all things under Christ. So this is why the Apostle Paul also says that we see through a mirror dimly, that we see God and we know God in part, but that one day we will know Him in full and that we will in fact be like Him. So here's some things for this week. Spend some time in the evenings and at bedtime helping your child review his or her day. Just ask some basic questions. And if you sense that there might be something to sort of pay attention there, help your child think about some of the times when they may have felt unloved in that particular day. So simple questions like, hey, did anything happen today that made you feel unloved? Alongside maybe another question like, when did you feel loved today? Or when did you feel loved by God? And these questions are maybe not questions where you're going to see a lot of conversation erupt, but they're planting seeds for later on. It might not feel like there's a ton going on in these small moments together, but as you sow these questions, what we're doing is we're normalizing the end of the day time of reflection. And we're also normalizing the fact that part of that reflection can and probably should include some sort of reflection about when we've experienced God and when we haven't. So listen well this week, give some hugs, encourage gratefulness and thankfulness. And as you make emotional connections with your child, you're teaching them to pay attention to what's going on the inside. Okay, blessings to you and blessings on your week.